stream, the benefits outweigh any concern for cost or for I think that's full stop. The benefit.
Thank you. Absolutely, but I think there is a different approach that companies should take, and this is along the profitability axis. We started the conversation with Milton Friedman, right, and the primacy of the shareholder. If we look actually narrowly as opposed to broadly in serving the shareholders, it's all about making the companies more and more efficient. So there are many parts of the impact investment. There are many parts of the legislation that tie into efficiency, reducing consumption of fossil fuels, of electricity, pardon me, of water. These are directly tied into profitability. We reduce the cost of the inputs, basic economics. So I think there is a connection, and this is a role for consultants, there is a role for advisors, there is a role for lawyers and so on, to see how it's the best fit in the current model, as opposed to position sustainability as being, as I mentioned, a contrarian model. We need to change everything. Then it's difficult. Large companies don't like change. People don't like change.
No, so here's where we think a little bit differently. Any given company, they need to embed sustainability. And usually the model is you go in and you do an assessment of where they are from a sustainability perspective, and you give a long laundry list of all the things that they're not doing or that they're doing wrong. Right? We like to approach this a little bit differently. We want to flip the script and focus on all the long laundry list of things that they're doing right. And uncovering, I spoke about the hidden impact of the company. If you start to really unearth, and by hidden impact, I don't mean if you make tires, you make the best rubber tires. And the impact is that all the cars that utilize our tires are less prone to getting in a car accident due to a tire malfunction. Well, that's great. But there's impact beyond that. How do we measure that? For example, if a company has good paying jobs for its employees, or there's equal advancement for all genders, or they greatly contribute to the community, or they go above and beyond to minimize the waste that they generate, or they go above and beyond minimizing the waste of water if they happen to be in an area where there's water scarcity, then you can start to look beyond those immediate actions. Those are just, outputs or outcomes, but what is the actual impact? So said company decides, you know what, we don't have enough diversity in our senior ranks. We determined that by the year 2030, we're going to increase the higher diverse genders by 30%. And they announce it on their website. And over the next few years, you'll see that they have different genders, as part of. And then what happens to that? And then what? Right? So here's what happens. Well, if there's equal pay, that means that across gender, you're generating the economic ability for those people to go back into their homes and their communities and spend, to pay for healthcare for their children and their parents, to pay for better education. So how is that lifting the community, right? That is the type of impact that nobody's really measuring. But if the company decided to try to measure and understand the impact that they actually made, they could actually use that as part of their marketing, as part of their brand positioning, as part of their story. And that will then generate additional attention and bring in clients that they might not necessarily be looking for. I have a great story. There's a company, Eileen Fisher, here in the United States. It's a clothing company. And don't quote me on the exact numbers, but I have to give credit to NYU and the ROSI, Return on Sustainable Investment method. There's Eileen Fisher employed this method to measure the return on their sustainable investment. And this is where I learned about this company's example that I'm about to give. For years, they tried to penetrate a younger demographic than they traditionally target, which is middle-aged women and from there above. They tried and they tried and they tried with not a lot of success. And at some point in time, they decided to start a recycling program where people could bring their old Eileen Fisher garments and recycle them in exchange for credit, or I don't really remember. When they started to do this, what they started to see was an inflow of younger people coming into their stores, right? They couldn't understand why. Well, it turns out that without even trying, without paying for marketing or fancy campaigns, that simple act had such a consequential impact on their bottom line and their brand. And they did that in the name of sustainability, but it actually ended up impacting the entire organization for the better. Those are the kinds of examples that we use in the world of impact that we try to drive forward. Like sustainability, actually forget about the definition that you think there is. Focus on the positive, build on that positive, unearth that impact, try to capitalize on that impact, and in the process embed, these principles and harness technology as well along the way to know that can definitely bring a lot of benefits.
You brought a very, very powerful case, a very interesting case. And actually, when you talk about stakeholders, many times people don't put in the category of stakeholders. They put the customers, they put the employees of the company. But companies have long winding supply chains. And actually, if there is a way to measure downstream impact on the supply chain on such changes and such, corporate sustainability programs, I think would be very interesting if there is a case for measuring the downstream impact. You mentioned, for instance, tire manufacturing, the rubber cut from Brazil and other developing countries or underdeveloped countries. And there is an impact.
There are companies, there are companies that are already doing a lot of this impact measurement and management. Impact measurement and management is not mainstream yet. It's actually been part of what organizations like the World Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank and those types of things have been doing for a long time. Is part of what a lot of philanthropies, nonprofit organizations have been doing. Their donors kind of want to know the impact of the money they're giving. But it's one of those tools that we definitely want to mainstream. The benefits outweigh any concern for cost or for I think that's full stop. The benefits of impact measuring. You can't manage what you can't measure. And there's so much more that you can measure beyond just financials within your company. And we see it as a missed opportunity for companies not to want to measure everything that they have the ability to measure and manage that, irrespective of whether it's financial or non-financial.
Absolutely, that connects to your previous discussion about setting a single or a consistent way of reporting, a single standard, which will facilitate alignment of measurements, because we still have two systems, a metric system and an imperial system around the world, right? we need at least this equivalence, so we know what an inch is in millimeters and how many millimeters are in an inch. So absolutely, I can see. And eventually, the economics will help that the loss of economics, right? Because larger markets demand more standardization, demand better measurements, demand clear measurements, and that's in technology as much as it is in finance. Right? We want to understand risk as one measurement, not 50 different measurements. And that's where impact investment comes into, for instance. But I think we're missing. We will be on miss if we don't mention education uh, you mentioned at a certain point that we need multifunctional um, skill sets, right? And there are organizations that are using different skills than traditionally they have been used in the industry. So, we can talk about the higher education. We can talk about the training in the programs, in fact, in companies. Uh, so a broad question, right? What's new and what should be changing in education as a result of impact investment?
So what we've seen is that the move, rush towards having programs that educate people on what is sustainability. And most programs that I've come across doesn't mean that, I haven't come across all the programs out there that teach sustainability, but the ones that I've come across tend to lean heavily on environmental issues. And to think that career people that have been out of school for some time are going to go do that course and all of a sudden become experts in sustainability is a little short-sighted, right? I think the opportunity in that respect comes from the younger generation that is fresh out of school that might want to focus on environmental stuff. But the truth is, sustainability is not just environmental issues, right? We want to live in a world where we can achieve our goals, but in order for us to achieve our goals, we shouldn't have to compromise the ability of future generations to achieve their goals and have their happily ever after, right? So if we start from that, it's much more than the environment, it's how we treat each other, it's how we treat the planet, it's how the planet and how society affects our business, is how do we become more mindful of everyone and everything around us? How do we learn to listen? If you think about all the types of people that affect the business, that impact the business, whether it's because they're buying from them or they're selling to them or they're working within them or they're partnering with them or they're simply neighbors, the fact that we're not collectively listening to all of those voices, we're sure changing ourselves as a business community. We need to. So back to my question of how do we drive the education of sustainability? It starts by bringing a sustainability lens to all the different disciplines, rather than isolating sustainability as the one thing everybody has to rush to learn. So, for example, if I am in supply chain, how do I what is that lens that I need to apply? Well, what is the labor conditions of different companies within my supply chain? What is the transparency? What is data protection? What is waste management of those members of my supply chain? That's just one example. How does my supply chain affect the communities where they navigate? How does it affect the people that it touches? Right? If I am in marketing is about words and is about narrative and content and messaging. How does the messaging that I'm putting out, the content that I'm putting out, going to affect different communities? For me to is it gonna
talking about the role of education and the changes that have to happen? And in summary, I think you are mentioning that you cannot isolate sustainability as a single, branch of an education. It should be transdisciplinary or cross-disciplinary.
So we see, an opportunity for skill development, not, it doesn't have to be, is teaching people to be more in tune with what the impact of their individual actions as a function are going to be. If I'm an accountant or a brand expert or a marketeer, like how do my actions and the output, the outcomes of my work, how do they impact my company, those around me, the different stakeholders? That's the beginning. And it's a different way to think about it because, it used to be that I get an assignment, say I'm in marketing, I get an assignment, I write copy, I put it out there and full stop. But if I say, I make the best tires in the world, better than anybody else, buy my tires,
Mhm.
is that enough? Like,
Yeah.
what's behind that, right? That's no longer the case. I think consumers are way too smart to buy into that nowadays. Like, what makes them better? What makes you better as a company? One example of the company that say there are companies out there that make wonderful products, but the leadership of the company is not well liked by the market, right? So there are car companies, for example, not to pick on any given company, but Tesla. Their cars are beautiful. They are changing the landscape of transportation. The idea of an electric vehicle is wonderful, but depending on how the leadership of Tesla behaves, some people may not want to buy a Tesla. Or if you dig a little bit deeper into the supply chain and you understand, well, to make those batteries, you have to, what are the working conditions of the people that are digging out the parts that are going to go into those batteries? So educating our company, educating our stakeholders to think a little bit beyond the disciplines in which they navigate. Is teaching them to work together. That's also something else that is part of sustainability is how do we really get different disciplines to work together and understand how they impact each other, right? And well, this is not a thing that you go and get a certificate and you stop learning, right? This is continuous lifelong learning. And there's new things and new concepts and new ideas and new regulation and new information every single day. We got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Juliana, we have a lot of students and professionals communicating with AKFI on a daily basis, and they're seeking careers in such a field in sustainability focused consulting or management. We're talking about change management when I was listening to everything you're describing. What are your piece of advices to those people who wants to pursue a career or who wants to make a contribution in such a field?
Because the easy one is, go find it. It's the easy one is go get, if you're going through college majoring sustainability, environmental sciences, and like that's the easy, low hanging fruit. I think that the more interesting one is what is it that you want to do? What is it that you're passionate about? And how can you apply that sustainability, that impact list to whatever it is that you want to do? Say, to me, it doesn't really matter which discipline you choose. The kick here is, are you, in everything that you do, are you thinking about the impact of what you do beyond what's in front of you? Whether you're a doctor or an accountant or in investment banking or in marketing or in sustainability, what is the impact of what you're doing? What is that impact to society? What is that impact to the environment? Take, if I want to be in a hospital business because I want to save lives, well, hospitals actually create a lot of waste. So how are we going to manage that waste? How are we going to think beyond the obvious? My advice to students nowadays is train yourself to think in a 360 way. Train yourself to think about not just the outputs and the outcomes of what you do, but the impact of what you do, irrespective of what profession you choose. But again, the low hanging fruit is there's many wonderful programs on sustainability and D&I and data and AI, but that's a low hanging fruit. And the other thing that I would say is use your voice and hold companies accountable for what they're saying and what they're doing. If it's not you guys, then I don't know who will, because at the end of the day, we're leaving this mess behind for you guys to fix, unfortunately. So start fixing it now by holding us accountable, by voicing your concerns, by taking a seat at the table if nobody's giving it to you. That would be that's what I tell my kids anyway.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Juliana, for everything you've shared today, the examples and your concepts with the company 14800. And we're gonna have these detailed description about the company, about Juliana under our copy, under the video. So make sure you guys check it out and learn more about what Juliana is doing with her company on a sustainable development path. Thank you again for taking the time, and thanks to our audience for tuning in. Make sure you tune in every week for a new episode of AKFI's Actionable ESG Talk series, where you can gain new perspective on how to mitigate risk and create value by integrating ESG and sustainability and digital transformation. Thank you very much. Until next week, goodbye for now. Bye, Juliana. Bye, Manuel.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Juliana. Thank you, Isabella.